ACSI Chief Executive Louise Davidson said she was pleased the regulations were overturned, saying they would have created onerous red tape. The regulations were rushed through without parliamentary scrutiny and with no justification, rationale, or harm identified, she said. Senator Rex Patrick, episode, wasted taxpayers' money and the Parliament's time. James Brickwood. Among the other proposed changes was the requirement for proxy advisors to hold an Australian Financial Services Licence, AFSL, and disclose recommendations to companies on the same day the advice is provided to clients. Super funds would have also been required to disclose how they vote on shareholder motions. Advisors could have received a maximum penalty of $11 million for breaking the new rules, which some feared would be levied for small administrative errors. Business groups, which were supportive of the regulations, said the Senate's decision to overturn the regulations was a setback for transparency. Advertisement. Angus Armour, Chief Executive of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, said he was disappointed proxy advisors would further be exempt from AFSL licensing. The key substantive obligations of AFSL license holders are difficult to argue against: that licensees provide their financial services efficiently, honestly and fairly, have adequate conflict management arrangements in place, and comply with financial services laws. Proxy advice is a profitable, global industry. Given its highly influential role in Australian markets, it is appropriate that proxy advice is regulated to these reasonable standards, said Mr. Armour. One big thought bubble. Business Council of Australia President Tim Reed said it was disappointing that the Senate overturned common sense changes that were clearly in the interests of the shareholders and high-functioning capital markets. The government's reforms were designed to introduce the same standards of professionalism to proxy advisors that apply to other influential participants in financial markets, said Mr. Reed. Advertisement. Senator Patrick was scathing of the regulations, telling the Australian Financial Review they were one big thought bubble from the Treasurer that just wasted taxpayers' money and the Parliament's time. The Senate did its job today. This was bad law, crafted to please Josh Frydenberg's big business mates and political donors, and the Senate rightly rejected it. This has got to be a world record startup, then shutdown of a regulatory regime. It lasted 3 days, said Senator Patrick. The prospects of Senator Patrick's motion succeeding were thrown into doubt last month, after One Nation said the matter was not a priority for them in the final sitting days of Parliament. But the minor party ultimately wound up supporting the move to disallow the regulations, along with the Greens, Labor, and the rest of the Senate crossbench. Responding to the news, Mr. Frydenberg slammed Labor for siding with the Greens to roll back reforms designed to improve the accountability and transparency of the proxy advice and superannuation sectors. Advertisement. They opposed the most significant changes to super in 30 years, which are expected to deliver around $18 billion in savings for members, said Mr. Frydenberg, referring to the government's landmark Your Future, Your Super Reform package. They opposed the need for litigation funders to hold an Australian Financial Services Licence, which is now law. And now they have voted against superannuation funds disclosing to their members how they voted on company resolutions. Cluster fiasco. Ownership Matters Chief Executive Dean Parch said the entire exercise was a cluster fiasco and thanked the Senate crossbench for standing up for free market principles. It was profoundly disappointing that the government indulged crony capitalists and the major business lobbies at the expense of respect for property rights, the freedom to contract, and the right to confidential advice, said Mr. Parch. Ownership Matters is one of 4 proxy advice firms in operation in Australia. Advertisement. Stephen Jones, Labor's financial services spokesman, said the vote was a great outcome for corporate transparency and for shareholders. Hopefully now Josh Frydenberg will fix his attention on the real problems in the Australian economy instead of searching for problems that don't exist, said Mr. Jones. Frydenberg's bloody nose. Green Senator Nick McKim, who co-sponsored the motion, described it as a significant blow to the government's agenda of looking after its billionaire mates. The Liberals should be ensuring that billionaires and big corporations pay their fair share of tax, instead of letting them off the hook in every way possible, he said. Scott Connolly, Assistant Secretary of the Australian Council of Trade Unions, accused the Treasurer of waging an ideological war against superannuation. Advertisement. The Senate delivered Josh Frydenberg a bloody nose today. He should learn his lesson and stop messing with super. Every one of his petty attacks undermines the retirement savings of working people and risks forcing Australians to work until they drop, retire into poverty, or both. The ACTU is a shareholder in industry super funds including Australian Super, which is a member of ACSI.